Hi, welcome to RebzBasics. This episode, we're going to talk about ramen noodles, that quintessential first apartment food. Their variety, ease of preparation, and low cost make them a common go-to food for broke college students and people with too much month at the end of their money alike. But despite that status in the United States, ramen noodles are a big popular dish in places like Japan and South Korea. And not only popular, but hearty as well. In fact, the secret to good ramen noodles in Japan and Korea is a variety of toppings. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go over some ways to jazz up that plain bowl of broth and noodles that you just made. And later, I'll show you a way of making ramen noodles that you may not have tried before. Sort of a Reb's way of doing things. Let's get started. Let's start with our vegetables. As you can see, I have corn and broccoli here. Now when it comes to vegetables, I prefer fresh, but if that's not possible, I recommend frozen vegetables like these over canned vegetables. Frozen vegetables come in a wider variety, they're not mushy like some canned vegetables can be, and they also don't have the added salt that canned vegetables do that you have to take into account when you're cooking. When using green onions, always make sure to wash and remove any bad parts before you cut them. Now let's slice the green onions. Green onions are great in ramen. They add a fresh, raw flavor and a nice bite to the dish. Now the carrots. Make sure to peel your carrots every time. And now we're going to slice them on a bias, which is slicing something on a sharp angle. The angle of the cut exposes a greater surface area of the carrot to the cooking heat, and it allows it to cook more quickly in a stir fry, which is traditionally a high heat, short duration way of cooking. I bought sliced mushrooms because they were the same price as uncut ones. Always let somebody else do your work for free if they offer. Now to cook our vegetables. Start with a hot pan, then add the oil and allow it to get hot. We'll start with the corn. We just want to get a little bit of brown on the corn. As it's cooking, you'll even get some of the kernels popping up and bouncing out of the pan. It's the same principle that makes popcorn, although this corn isn't going to pop quite like that. When it's hot, remove the corn from the skillet into a bowl and put it in an oven that's on the lowest possible setting to keep it warm. Add more oil as needed in between vegetables. If you want, you can cook all the vegetables at once, but I prefer to keep them separate. It allows you to present this meal buffet style, which is cool if you're cooking for more than just yourself. Now add your carrots. You'll see that cutting them on a bias like this really cuts down on the cooking time. And here's the mushrooms. Make sure you have a good amount of oil in the pan before putting the mushrooms in, as they're going to soak up almost all of that oil before releasing it along with a lot of liquid as they cook. Remove the mushrooms before they're completely cooked and allow them to finish cooking on their own. Then just add the broccoli and keep it in the pan long enough to get heated and soak up some of the flavor left behind by the mushrooms. Another popular topping for ramen is eggs. Start with water and a little vinegar. When it's almost boiling, carefully add your eggs so as not to crack the shell. The vinegar will soften the shell for easier peeling. We're only boiling this egg for 5 minutes to keep the yolk soft, but if you prefer a hard yolk, you can boil it for 8 minutes, but I don't recommend any more than that. Once the egg is cooked the desired time, put it in a bowl of cold water to stop the cooking process without making the egg too cold. Now, to cook the meat. Start out with a hot pan, then allow your oil to get hot before adding your meat. I'm using beef, but this recipe works for any meat you want to use. Move your meat around the pan a little to make sure that it's not sticking, then add 1/4 cup of soy sauce and about a teaspoon of sugar. Just let this simmer until the meat is almost done. Just be careful not to overcook the meat because that can make it dry and chewy. Okay. Now we'll take the meat out of the skillet and we're going to allow the remaining liquid to cook down. This process is called reduction, and it allows the liquid to thicken, and it allows the flavors to develop and become more concentrated. Now, Once we've got the liquid reduced enough that it won't be drowning the meat, we're just going to pour it back over the meat to give that meat some added flavor. And once we're done there, we'll put the meat in a warm oven to hold. Now the noodles. Follow the directions on your noodle packet. Measure out the water and get it boiling. If you like a little more broth, you can add a little water, and if you prefer less, you can take it away. When the water's boiling, add your seasoning packet and stir it in good. Now add your noodles. Ramen noodles in a pack usually take about 3 minutes to cook. You'll see them swelling up like this. Stir the noodles to separate them and cook them until they're done. And now it's time to assemble your bowl. Of course, start off with your noodles and be sure to get some of that broth too. If the noodles have soaked up too much, feel free to add a small amount of hot water to stretch it out a little bit. Now for those tasty toppings. Just go down the line and grab a little of everything. Meat, vegetables, and add on toppings like sriracha and soy sauce, but just take it a little easy with that soy sauce. It can make things a little bit saltier, so always add it slowly. When peeling your egg, take care not to break the yolk if it's still a little bit soft. It's part of the visual appeal of the presentation. Now put it right on top and in the middle in a prominent place. And there you have it. Nice colors, visually appealing, and it tastes great too. I'm hungry just looking at it. Okay, just remember, you're not limited by my choice of toppings and ingredients. You're only limited by your own imagination and your budget. Now for the Rebz way. We're going to make our ramen noodles into chicken primavera with a rich, creamy sauce full of vegetables that you're really going to enjoy. Here's how you do that. We begin our primavera with the chicken, which I've seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, basil, oregano, and paprika. As always, make sure your pan and oil are hot before adding anything to the pan. Allow the meat to get a nice brown sear to lock in the juices and the flavors, then turn it over. Get a good sear on both sides. With experience, you'll be able to tell doneness by touch, but for now, it's probably best if you just cut the chicken open to see. Now the noodles. Follow the recipe on the package, but substitute milk for water. Since you're using milk, you need to stir this continuously to keep it from scorching. If you think you've scorched it, taste it. If it tastes burnt, throw it out, clean the pan, and start over. This time, we'll add the vegetables to the liquid before the noodles so that they get nice and mixed in and their flavors spread through the sauce as it cooks. Bring the pot to a boil and add the noodles. I want you to see this mistake I made. I underestimated the size of the pot I needed for these noodles, and it started to boil over. So I had to move it over to a larger pot. The lesson here is don't be afraid of mistakes because you're going to make them. But also, make sure to correct your mistake as soon as possible so it doesn't get worse. Once the noodles are cooked, take the pot off the heat, turn off the burner, and add a 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Stir until the cheese is dissolved and the sauce is thickened. Now for plating. When plating noodles, I like to start by putting them at the center of the plate. And then I stack other stuff on top. That gives height to the dish, and that makes it more visually appealing. Some green onions for color and flavor. I like to put a raw egg on my creamy noodles. To separate an egg yolk from the white, crack the egg and pour it into your hand, allowing the white to run out between your fingers, then place it on top of your noodles. Mixing the yolk into the noodles while eating gives the sauce an added richness that I love. Last of all, I like to top it off with a little more Parmesan cheese. And there you have it, chicken primavera. For an added kick, you can brown the top under your oven's broiler, or you can just ask your roommate to borrow the torch he uses with his dabbing rig to do it. And that's it for this episode of RebzBasics. If you found the episode informative, click like and subscribe and turn on notifications. And be sure to tell all your friends about the channel. We'll be having regular content. So until next time, we'll see you at Family Meal.